Use the hand crank to release a bot. These little robots will help you to perform tasks and unlock doors or puzzles.
Welcome to my favorite world in the game visually. I don't know if it's my favorite mechanically, but it does have a few extra mechanics, and the game design in this game is really simple, so it's probably a contender by default.
Splendid! Now, scoot over to the attractor rod and press the Y button to call him over. Press it again if you want him to stop. If you can attract the bot, he'll spark the disc and open the door.
Apparently that explanation was far more verbose in the PS2 version, but I've only played the Xbox version, and it's the one with bump mapping, so that would be why. But as he said, the idea is that we press the Y button near these attractor rods and the robot runs over to it. We want to get the robot to stand on this disc so that way we'll power it and open the door. As was said before, one swipe and one slam is enough to take out the crows, but last time I did the slam and then the swipe, but the reverse order might actually be more convenient. The swipe knocks the crow back slightly, which makes more room for the slam. The slam does have a wind up after all. As the journal unnecessarily tells us, we need to swipe a switch here in the pit, but that's also where one of our crystal heart pots is located. Now I really wish the game... No, Metal Guardian. No, I've got it. It's already done, I've already swiped the switch. Anyway, the locations in this game aren't exactly enormous, so finding the crystal heart pots isn't too difficult except in a few select stages where they hide them in really cruel positions. Not cruel for a collectathon, but for this mostly linear game, yeah, sure. That one wasn't really hidden, though. Nothing too fancy with the moving robots yet. So far it's been a straight line between the robot and the attractor, but of course that will change as the level goes on. Still, if you're expecting something on the level of an indie puzzle game, I have to stop you there. The puzzles aren't that intense or interesting. I feel like this world may be a good representation of the whole game, actually. Like, this world has some interesting gimmicks, but they're so surface level, and although they do get slightly more complex uses, it's nothing that you would ever write home about or recommend to someone. Like, you wouldn't call the mechanics or the way they're used clever. We're using our power boost magic here because although it isn't necessary, it does kill the crows slightly quicker, and they have a ton of mana lying around for us to pick up, so we might as well. If you don't use the abilities, it might seem like the mana is excessive, but I'm here to tell you that even if you do use the abilities anytime they might be even a little bit useful, the mana will still seem excessive. When I first played the game, I definitely didn't use any magic in this room, but when I noticed there were mana crystals lying around, I decided to use the power boost just for the recording, because otherwise you wouldn't get to see much of it outside of the boss battles. I could understand if the combat was difficult, and thus you might want to use more magic to get an upper hand. And if they decided to mix some of those shooting crows in there, like this guy right here, then I could definitely see a reason to use the magic. It wouldn't be a necessity or anything, but you could have used the speed magic to go a little faster so you could get to the shooty crow and take him out so he wouldn't snipe you while you dealt with the other ones. You know, that's a very simple idea for enemy placement, but it's not out of question this early in the game, and it would get the players thinking about how to optimize their combat strategies. I recall some people complaining about the camera when this game was released, but you see we're in a very narrow area full of tight corridors, and the camera's behaving reasonably well. And it never goes out of your control or jerks away from you. It is true that for some reason the camera's controls are permanently reversed horizontally, which is unfortunate, but the controls still work fine after you get used to that. If I recall correctly, there's never really any time where you have difficulty seeing what you need to see as far as the platforming goes. But I could be wrong, you know, I haven't memorized the entire game. Just most of it. We're turning the crank here to summon one of our robot buddies, and for the first time, this robot buddy is going to need to take a corner. It's a really tough mission, but I have faith that he can handle it. So just as we can manually turn on the attractors, we can manually turn them off if we want the robot buddy to stop walking toward them. But the robot buddy is very lenient with our timing. So even if he is a little bit off-center when we want him to walk somewhere, he can correct himself. On the one hand, this is very nice if you happen to get the robot buddy at an unfortunate angle. But on the other, it just makes the puzzles even easier, and they are already incredibly easy. This crystal heartbot is behind you, it spawns behind you after you solve the puzzle. So it can be easy to miss. I have missed it a few times. Now up here I make use of the speed magic for some very unnecessary and very flashy platforming, something much flashier than the game probably intended you to do. But the speed magic gets so little use in this game, I thought it deserved one last hurrah. This might actually be the last time I show it off. But being able to walk on air and easily run past a lot of timed hazards does have its advantages. The advantages are few and far between in this game, but they do exist. There's a heartbot down there. It's on top of a garbage crusher, which means if we land on it at the wrong time, it will open up and eat us, which is unfortunate. But if we manage to platform across the garbage crushers alive, then we can use the elevator to get back up. It's kinda a cute hazard, but it's not something you really need to worry about. I do like that we can hide behind that box to avoid the projectile crow's shots. That's actually kinda cool. It's one of the few places in the game that's an option you would actually have to take. To avoid getting hit, I mean. Now that we've ran around and gotten all the goodies out of the area, we're going to head back and get our robot friend, because you see a disc here that he needs to spark or else we can't progress forward. And this is the ultimate robot buddy puzzle. It's the biggest and scariest one. I know it may seem kind of early to get that out of the way, but we've got more mechanics to explore in this world. Malice usually likes to get the old mechanics out of the way before it starts exploring new ones. They don't mix super well. Even though this is the most difficult puzzle and the one that you're most likely to lose on, it does move really slow. I'm not sure how exactly I would fix that personally, but it does make it feel a little bit tedious if you manage to fail, because then you have to restart the whole puzzle, and even though it's only a minute, it tends to feel a lot longer. Stuff like this isn't super memorable or anything, but it's just how the game rolls. It doesn't do anything spectacular. And you know, there are a lot of other 3D platformers with super harmless mechanics that don't stand out too much because they're just really average like this. But at least this one has a lot of personality to spare, you know? And even though the boss fights aren't worth recommending the game over, not only do they look interesting, but some of them encourage the magic, you to use the magic way better than anything else in the game. This is the first time you really have to start and stop the attractor quickly to get the robot buddy where he needs to be. And it can be a little difficult to time properly, but thankfully the pistons take a while to go up and down. But you can see, even though it works fine, it's not thrilling or engaging, and I'd be hard-pressed to think of a time where a puzzle this rudimentary would be engaging. A lot of this game's problems, I think, can be explained or excused by the fact that it was in development for 4 years, and it has a lot of old sensibilities that belonged on the PlayStation 1, or even would have been interesting on the PlayStation 1. But I'm not sure that puzzle we just did is one of those things. I'm not sure that would have been interesting on the PS1 either. Sometimes I end up worrying excessively that I missed a heartpot, but then it's right there at the end of the level. That happened at least a couple times. I do really enjoy this world's aesthetic, like the background. It looks like outer space, but with gears in it. How can you not love that? That crystal heartpot was hidden right behind the start, and no one could blame you for missing it.
Watch the patterns of the platforms and step across them in that order to collect a yellow cock. You will need 4 yellow cocks.
So the Metal Guardian, just took away the one thing that might be challenging about this section by explaining how the memory maze works. But yeah, it's just a simple memory maze, as the name would imply. We swipe the switch, it shows us which order we need to step on the platforms, and then we do that. For our hard work, we get a yellow cog which we can put into these steps, which will eventually make them lower so that way we can reach the top. We have 2 more memory maze patterns to go through. Again, I don't think this would be very interesting even on the PS1. I think this would be underwhelming in any generation actually, aside from the graphics. But it doesn't get in the way of enjoying the rest of the game, which is the atmosphere and the presentation, the sometimes questionable voice acting, and the story. None of these things particularly interesting to most people, I imagine, and some of them might even get a few eye rolls from people, especially the attempts at humor, which admittedly are not humorous at all. But for me personally, it's enjoyable.
Now, retrace your steps back to safety and put the yellow cog in the slot on the big tower.
I'm really not sure why they felt the need to put that dialogue in there. Were they afraid that people would walk back across the maze incorrectly? Like, for some reason, they would assume that now that the maze was solved, it doesn't work anymore? And we already put one of the yellow cogs into the tower. Even if we didn't, it's clearly the only thing to interact with. I suppose it could be considered challenging that you have to walk through the maze both forward and backwards, so you technically need to memorize 2 patterns. The stuff about memory mazes and memory games in games is weird. If you make a memory game too easy, then everybody's going to be able to solve it no problem because everyone has, well, almost everyone has a memory. But if you try and make it more difficult, then you might accidentally create a really abstract kind of trial and error, and nobody wants a trial and error platforming maze. I think. There might be someone out there who wants that, like a huge maze made of nothing but trial and error platforming that you have to go through over and over until you memorize everything. And if you can find someone like that, let me know, because I actually want to talk to them about it. Because differing tastes in video games is something that's of particular interest to me. Like, ideally you have some sort of demographic you're trying to appeal to, but when people critically analyze a game, sometimes they throw entire demographics under the bus, and it's hard to say whether that's good or bad. Like, obviously some game design decisions are bad regardless of which demographic they're aiming for, but at the same time, if you're not part of a certain demographic, it can be hard to analyze something properly. Video games can be way more divisive than film or television because they require player input, you know? When it comes down to how controls feel or the feedback a game gives you, things like that, it can be really hard to say who's right, because that's the kind of thing that's difficult to pin down.
Collect the spell at the top of the tower, and then find a switch to power up the level.
You know, that bit of instruction was so incredibly vague that I'm not sure it would have helped even if we did need it.
Marvelous! This is bullet shield magic. Pull and hold the right trigger, and press the Y button once to use it. The magic will protect you from all bullets and projectiles, but I'm afraid it won't help you with other kinds of attack.
I have to wonder if there could ever be a real-life equivalent to that, or maybe there is one already, but it seems kinda odd to me. Like, anything that could protect you from a projectile attack would generally be able to protect you from a melee attack as well, right? Even if whatever protection you were using had a flaw that was easily exploited by an opponent's weapon, if that weapon hit the protection directly, the protection would still blunt the force a little bit, no matter how little. When I started talking over Malice, this is not the direction I expected my commentary to go in. But I suppose I underestimated how little it happens in this particular level. Anyway, now that we have the bullet shield magic, the only really challenging part of the combat, being the projectile crows, is now negated. No need to hide behind objects anymore or choose when to attack carefully. We just turn on the bullet magic and the crows are instantly useless. See, this does encourage the player to use magic more, even if it's still not necessary, but this isn't the kind of encouragement I meant. I meant encouragement to use the magic in creative fashions and strategic fashions, not to just turn off the difficulty. It's true the bullet shield magic does wear off after a short period, but there's nothing to stop you from turning it back on instantly, especially since it uses so little mana. I mean, I'm sure it's still possible to have this bullet shield magic and place the enemies in a way that encourages players to use the magic creatively and think strategically. But that seems like it's far beyond what Argonaut Games was attempting to accomplish here. Like, if they wanted to do that kind of stuff, we'd have seen hints of it already in the game. We do need to constantly adjust ourselves on this platform because of how it turns, but aside from looking pretty, there's not much else to it. And instead of bothering with the adjacent platform, we can instead float over, grab the collectible without even touching it, and then float down to get this other crystal heart pot. Maximum efficiency in Malice. Again, probably not intended by the developer, but it's a better use for the magic than anything they might have thought of. This is the last bit of the world, by the way, before the boss. We got all the brown cogs we needed up here, so that way we can open the door, and these are entirely distinct from yellow cogs, I assure you. I'm not sure what the distinction is, but it unlocked the door, and that's what matters. Look, don't point out that both kinds of cogs basically do the same thing from a consequentialist standpoint. I'm sure the developers knew that. So this crow with projectiles has 2 guns, and as such is more dangerous. He also takes more hits, but our bullet shield magic just as easily makes a joke of him. This last heart pot may seem kind of scary, but if you remember, our double jump is very floaty, so it's easy to get.
Good heavens! I fear this beast holds the 4th key. Careful, my dear. I don't know what he's been eating, but he seems to belch fire. There might be spikes in that floor, too.
I do love spikes. Give the little brat a pierced navel, and torso, and head.
Use your club, Malice, but take care. This one's got a few tricks up his sleeve. If I were you, I'd wait until he's spat his fire or spikes, then give him a jolly good whack.
You know, this boss is just a barely, not the most basic 3D platforming boss imaginable. So I really don't think the Metal Guardian needed to tell us how to hurt it. I mean, when it's vulnerable, it glows blue. It's kind of obvious. Anyway, after it spits its fire, it tries to bite you several times before it'll spit its fire again. I like to bait it. That makes it go a lot faster. And of course, we are using our power boosting magic because it does make the fight go faster. This guy doesn't die nearly as quickly as the Firefly Queen because he is the next boss and as such has more health. Being able to bait the boss's bite like this is kind of humorous. I wonder if the developers knew about this, but I'm going to assume they didn't. So in addition to spitting fire, he can stomp on the floor and make spikes come out. It's a really light stomp, so I wonder how he gets the spikes out, but they do come out in a wave and we need to jump over them. That time I didn't get to him quickly enough, so our power boosting magic was wasted. But it's okay because we can just go back to baiting him again. That was a complete flub on my part, but even then, even giving the game the most generous of flubs, we only took 1 heart of damage. I do assume this boss is supposed to be threatening to some degree, but I honestly find him less threatening than the Firefly Queen, and she wasn't exactly tough. This game isn't an epic or anything, it's not incredibly long, so I think at this point in the game it's okay to have bosses that are actually challenging to fight. After he takes enough damage, he'll shoot fire in addition to using the spikes, and if you didn't pay enough attention to his combat animations, you might actually get hit by it. But even then you'd be fine because it only deals 1 heart of damage.
Curse you, Malice. You defeated my favorite reptile.
Well done, my dear. That's really annoyed the dog god. Behold the Clockwork Hammer, a weapon whose power is matched only by its nifty good looks. Use the same attack buttons for swipe and quake.
Lock your kennel, dog god. It's hammer time.
Ho, Hammer, ho, ho, ho. What? You think I wasn't cool in the 80s?
I'm just glad you ain't my dad, man. You could embarrass a kid big time.
Now then, my dear, to retrieve the 5th key, you must journey deep into the... Oh, that's odd. I thought that strange juju fellow had it.
What's strange about him?
What's normal about any of this? And more to the point, why can't I see the holder of the key more clearly? Something is amiss, Malice. We must be cautious. Go back to the Siren Tree. I will guide you from there.